Welcome to Bachademia, a podcast so educational two professors could be hosting it. Hi, I'm Dr. Danielle Dick-McGew, and joining me is Dr. Bill Henneman. Welcome to Bachademia. This week's guest is Dr. Adrianne Finlay, and we are so excited to have her here. She is a professor of English and a program director of creative writing at Upper Iowa University in Fayette, Iowa. And when she's not writing, reading, or grading, she's making soap to sell locally. So she'll have to tell you where you can get that to raise money for type 1 diabetes research. So Adrianne, welcome. We're so excited to have you here. What's something that you'd like our listeners to know about you?
Well, as far as the soap, it really is local. We have a Christmas open house where we just sort of spread it all over and people can buy their Christmas gifts, and all of the proceeds for that go towards type 1 diabetes. Also, well, let's see, I've watched The Bachelor and actually The Bachelorette since the very first season. And I've been around for a long time with it. I'm also a novelist. I have 2 books out, Your One and Only, young adult science fiction from 2018. And the most recent one was actually just this past August, and it's called Cut Off. And it actually has like a reality show kind of premise.
You have a young adult fiction book?
Yeah, too.
Oh, Danielle and I are both big young adult. Yeah, wow.
Oh,
we're gonna have to read you.
Yeah, they're out with Houghton Mifflin Harcourt.
And where can people buy these?
Anywhere books are sold.
Anywhere books are sold. So I could go on Amazon right now, click, and it'd be at my house in a day.
It would.
I'm so excited about this.
Oh man, Danielle's getting an end of the season present from Bill.
That's awesome.
Except I'm gonna do like you did to me with your Christmas card and only do like half the amount of money so that you have to pay for the rest of the shipping. Have we told that story on here?
For listeners that maybe are just tuning in, I sent Bill and Elaine a Christmas card, and they got a bill in the mail for it.
She was like 12 cents short, and we got this like harshly worded like note from our mail person that was like, you owe me 12 cents. So I went to our change jar and like put my 12 cents in and like put it in the mailbox, and then I have not stopped giving Danielle shit about it for forever.
Yeah, it's really embarrassing when you send out Christmas cards and your friends and the family have to pay for it. It was an accident. I don't know how it happened. We took them in. They told us how much we owed them. We paid an exorbitant amount of money to get them mailed out, and it was not enough for some people. So yes, so Bill will buy me half of one of Adrianne's books.
Well, I'm gonna buy you the whole book. I'm only gonna pay for half the shipping.
Or buy both books, but only pay for one of them.
Right.
Yeah. There we go. I love it. That's so exciting. So each episode, we like to start out with just a silly question. And this week's question is, what is something that other people are into that you could live without? So what's something that you can live without?
Bridgerton.
Oh, have you tried to watch it?
I tried, and I don't get it. Not for me.
I read the book. I haven't read it yet, though.
Okay.
I did watch Bridgerton, yeah. I mean, but I had complaints about it, but I have complaints about most things that I watch, so, but I still watch it.
Is there something that you can live without, Adrianne?
Coffee. That's something that like everybody's really, has strong feelings about, and, has posters on their walls and little like coffee mugs that express their love of coffee, and I just never developed the taste for it.
So I have a question. Is it like you could take it or leave it, or are you like it's disgusting?
I don't care for it.
But like you're not like, God, how can you guys drink this? Like if it was the only thing in the world, you would.
It kind of like a sip of like black coffee, just kind of like, yeah, I just
all right.
Sort of bleh.
I always wonder if it's like black licorice, where it's like, apparently you either like love black or licorice or you hate it. Like there's no in between. It's a genetic thing.
Yeah.
I'm not a coffee person either. I like caffeine, but I'm not a coffee person.
I drink tea usually if I want caffeine.
I'm 3 or 4 cups in by 9 o'clock.
Yeah. You're the don't talk to me till I've had my coffee.
My mom, who is like 4 feet 10 inches tall, drinks more coffee than any person I've ever met. And the running family joke in our family is that it like stunted her growth. Like she's been drinking it since she was a little kid. And now it's like a running joke with my friends. It's like if Bill hadn't drank all that coffee, he'd be like 7 feet tall. So for those of you who don't know, I'm not very tall.
I have never noticed your heights, Bill, but that's because we're on Zoom.
We've only been in the same room like twice, I think.
I think that maybe it's true. So, you know, mine, I was trying to think what mine is, and I'm like not a milk person. Like I like obviously milk in like cookies or with my Oreos, but I'm not like a person would never just like drink a glass of milk. I think that's nasty. But yeah, I feel like there's like a lot of things. Like I could live without showers. I'd take a bath. I'd bathe in my own filth every day. I'm good for that.
Okay, I gotcha. I take like 3 showers a day. I love showers. I just like stand in there and just think about things.
I prefer to lay and think about things.
Do you have like a big bathtub?
I do now.
Yeah. Okay.
A big jetted tub, but I don't ever use the jets.
Yeah.
And they're kind of gross. They're nasty. You know, cleaning the jets is a gross thing.
They shoot.
Not get it again.
They shoot out like skin cells, right? Like dead skin is what like ends up floating. When we bought our house, that's what the guy was like doing the check, and he's like, "Oh, that's dead skin cells." Like, thanks. Thanks, Jim, the home inspector.
Yeah, no, I think they're nasty, but so I don't use the jets, but it's a big soaker. And I would soak all the time if I could. All right, let's get to The Bachelor episode. 1 word. Go for it.
Family. Sorry. I said family. I feel like family was just front and center this whole time.
You mean with like the dad and everything?
And the other people talking about their families. And I felt like this episode was more about families than the Meet the Family episode, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah, I think mine was bleak. Like between the like late fall Pennsylvania countryside and the kind of downer dates that they had and the conversation with the dad, I just sort of, it all felt a little bleak, especially in the episode where they have like the fantasy suites and everything, where we're used to seeing them, you know, in Switzerland or, you know, in exotic locations with like beautiful settings, and this was such a contrast to that.
Absolutely. You know, I was like struggling because I felt like I wanted to say intense was my first one, or like it's intensifying, right? You know, but it's weird because it feels like that. Like you feel like, especially like Rachel's anxiety around things is really like amped up and the emotions are strong. But kind of like you were saying, Adrianne, there's also this element of like it just is going on. It's moving along. So yeah. So this episode does begin with some snippets of the women reflecting on their relationship with Matt, as well as their thoughts about the fantasy suites. To kind of get started, you know, how important do you all think these overnights are to the development of their relationships? You know, we hear Rachel kind of talk about how jealous she is that these women are with these other women are with Matt. Does that jealousy like tell us anything? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? Like, what are you all thinking?
I think that the overnights that they always have, they've got to be, on one hand, I'm always a little kind of icked out. Like it's always a little creepy to me that there's this suggestion that like 3 nights in a row, like he's just like, here's this girl, here's this girl. He's like, he's trying them out, you know, at a buffet. And the way the little letter from Chris Harrison shows up with a little key and everything, it's all a little bit creepy and like retrograde. But at the same time, it's got to be super valuable time for them because it's the time that there really are no cameras. And I'm hoping that they can have not just the sort of suggested, like they are now going to have sex, but have the conversations that they haven't felt able to have on camera. And I hope that that's part of it. And that's part of what goes on.
Absolutely.
They close that door.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably more important to the show than it is to their relationships, except for they get a lot of time unfettered by cameras. And so you wonder what goes on, what conversations happen. And so that's probably pretty important. The other thing is we were debating at the house when we were watching it, like, I don't think they happen 3 days in a row. I think there's got to be time, or Matt has got to be by that third one, because they don't go to, like, they have sex, they stay up and talk probably. Also, that's the first time they're sleeping in the same bed with that person. And anyone who's married or has dated someone knows that it takes a good 12 years to figure out how to sleep in the same bed. And some people just give up on it. Like, I sleep in my own bed a lot of times because I'm just not a good, so I imagine that he has like 2 hours of sleep by the end of this. And so if you get the third date, he's probably just got to be like, just freaking get this thing over. Like, I just want to take a nap. Like, nobody is worth this much lack of sleep. That's my take.
That's also like our age showing though, Bill.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, like you can't give up sleep to have sex one night.
Yeah.
Like, take the sleep.
Yeah. Or like real marital sex. Like, he has it and then like is asleep right after, and she's like, so tell me about it. And she like looks over and he's like,
but if they're all, if they're young and meant to be, infatuated with each other, then that is the time that it's like there's suddenly all this energy to stay up all night talking and being excited about that person. And I think that's what the show is, wants to capture, right? That idea.
It'd be a good look into a marriage though, as like he falls asleep and they're like, is there like a TV? Like, do I have a crossword? Like, what do I do now? My spouse is asleep. Like, what, like, I can't leave this hotel room.
What was this season where the fantasy suite was just like a kind of, sad trumpet horn kind of going down where they have basically the whole conversation is about how he wasn't up for it. Like,
oh yeah. The guy's name was Ed. And they kept saying like
sunburned that day.
Yeah, he couldn't properly show his affection towards her. And then they found out he had a girlfriend. Like, I think it probably had less to do with him being tired and probably some type of like conscience thing that he had going on.
Oh, what a bummer. So one of the things that I noticed was that they rarely referred to this as fantasy suites in this episode. They said it like a couple of times, but most of the time they said overnight dates. And I don't know what this means, but I felt it and I was like, well, that's interesting. Any thoughts? Like, one, did I just make this up? Did you all notice this? Do you think that there's a reason that they're moving away from the fantasy suite language? Is it just who's involved? I don't know.
I noticed the same thing, but I was trying to decide, is this like a PC type move? Is it like them trying to like make it something more than what it is? Or I have no idea.
If this is a PC move, then like, I don't know how to tell the Bachelor franchise. If you are listening, you have bigger fish to fry.
Well,
right
it's very on brand for The Bachelor to be like, let's address this. Like, like this other stuff was not, but
Fantasy suite is the inappropriate language here. Like, that cracks me up. I don't know, but I noticed it and I thought it was weird.
Maybe they just couldn't bring themselves to like call these, here's this other room at this resort hotel, at the La Quinta or whatever, that here's this other room that we now have, and they just couldn't bring themselves to call it a fantasy suite.
when they were at the La Quinta, they're like,
when they're at the the Courtyard Marriott or something, and
the one room, it's got a refrigerator in it and a hide-a-bed. It is class.
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
You can eat whatever you want out of the mini fridge and ABC is going to cover it.
Yeah.
Thank you, La Quinta.
That is the perk of being on this show. Okay, so the women reflect on the week ahead, and then it immediately shifts to Matt, whose dad is visiting, and they have this really personal and difficult conversation about his father's absence in his life, as well as Matt's concern for how his upbringing might affect his ability to commit or his future relationships. So I guess right away, any thoughts about this conversation? Reflections go.
I mean, I think what my first instinct was that, is this right to have on television? Like, and I think it's okay for Matt to have it on television, but I got the sense that his father wasn't really given a heads up on where this was going to be heading. And I don't think that was conducive to like the honest conversation that they were supposed to be having, because his father immediately got just defensive, which led to, Matt's question, which I actually can relate to quite a bit. Like, there's a reason why I watch these kinds of shows all the time and have for a long time is, my parents were divorced, and I was always, from the time I was really, really young, sort of investigating and trying to figure out, because, you read the statistics, if your parents are divorced, you're this X, percentage more likely to get divorced. So I was like, okay, how does this work? How do I figure this out? And so, that led me to reality shows, obviously. But what the result was is he didn't get his question answered, right? His question was, how do I not make the same mistake? And instead, he ends up sort of consoling his dad and kind of shrugging and saying, well, I guess I'm a different person than my dad, and maybe there's hope in that. And that's the only resolution that he can really get, because the dynamic of the relationship just ends up with the dad being defensive and Matt having to sort of pull back and say, you were an okay dad, and this is my issue or something.
Yeah.
Danielle,
Your thoughts, Bill?
do you have extra credit? I want to hear your extra credit before I make my comment.
So yeah, I'll jump into this a little. So there was a pretty big debate on social media about the appropriateness of filming this conversation. And Adrianne, I was so glad that you pointed out what you did, because I was feeling really uncomfortable with it as well. And most of the debates online seem to be kind of like, I felt like the inappropriateness for me was that I felt like maybe his dad didn't understand what he was there for, right? And I felt some of that too. So some people felt like it was exploitative. Others felt that it was really important to show a father and son, particularly a Black father and son, navigating through this issue. Others, I know Bill had shared with me, Rachael Lindsay sort of spoke out that she felt that it was inappropriate because of the way that the episode reaffirmed stereotypes about the absent Black father.
It was very reductive to that kind of stereotype,
Yes. And, so, and even Matt mentioned that, I think, in his Twitter comment, during the episode, he made a statement, talking about how difficult it was to watch this, and that like he kind of did give a nod to the way that this might be reaffirming some stereotypes about the absent Black father. And then other people felt like it was really important because it shed light on, how there are these systemic issues that affect Black families, and then Black families have to work through those things. Right. And so, and if I guess I had to I think that it's sort of both and, right? That it both is reaffirming these stereotypes, but at the same time, it's also showing Matt James expressing his feelings and emotions, in which challenges some stereotypes in terms of how Black masculinity is performed, right? So I think that it can kind of do both. So I started reading articles about this. I wanted to look into it a little bit more. I'd done some research on fathering, and a lot of research on fathering, like research actually on mothering, has really focused on white middle class fathers who are primarily secondary caretakers and playmates for their children. So, research on non-custodial divorced fathers, regardless of the ethnic background, shows an even more limited nurturing role. There's negative portrayals of fathers of color and Black fathers as irresponsible, which you sort of see reaffirmed through this. You have really macho or dictator-like images of Asian and Hispanic men. So when you look at fathering, you always have to recognize that how people do father depends and that there's different ways of doing fatherhood that are impacted by other parts of people's identities, right? So how we understand masculinity and masculinities, plural, right? Black masculinities influence how we understand fatherhood. So I'll just kind of point to maybe a few things that I think are great that are out there. I did come across a piece called in Critical Studies in Media Communication called Critiquing Reality-Based Televisual Black Fatherhood, a critical analysis of Run's House and Snoop Dogg's fatherhood. And it's a really interesting piece that talks about how these shows both actually kind of align with some of they critique the Cosby Show. And then in that kind of talk about how both of these reality TV shows show really engaged Black fathers, but there's also some ways that they reaffirm some stereotypes about Black fatherhood. But all three, the Cosby, Run's House, and Snoop Dogg's show really engaged and active fathering by Black men, which is really important. So I guess all of this is to say that, it's been the norm for fathers to play these emotionally distant wage earning roles. So interpersonally active, emotionally engaged roles in the day-to-day caretaking of fathers with their children in general is we're seeing a shift to more engaged fatherhood regardless of sort of race or ethnicity, but to recognize sort of how different ways of doing masculinity impacts how people do fatherhood. So there are ways that I think this episode was breaking norms around masculinity in terms of, showing emotion and talking through difficult things. But I also think that it was reaffirming problematic stereotypes. And so then the question is, well, why do those stereotypes, why do they exist? But also what are the systemic, Matt in his tweet says there's some systemic issues that have sort of have gotten us in this situation that we're in. I would love for Matt to get clear and specific about what those systemic issues are so that people can start making the connections. Hey, there are some things that are leading to this, and but they're solvable. And so, and they're not just always interpersonal, right? And so I think I would love to sort of see more of that. But that's my extra credit.
I mean, I think when you're talking about like depictions of masculinity, The Bachelor has this sort of interesting tightrope that it needs to walk, where obviously it has incredibly traditional gender roles. It's certainly, you know, obviously it's so heteronormative. It is, you know, inviting this romantic ideal of the strong and silent type, you know, this man who can, you know, has all these women and is choosing between them. But at the same time, the viewer has to be able to connect to who the Bachelor is. And it's, you know, and I've often wondered if they're not offering therapy sessions for the lead on the show, so that he comes to a place where he can, and Matt does a pretty good job of this mostly, he comes to a place where he can be articulate about his emotional state and about his feelings, not just towards the women themselves, but to the situation that he's in, and his feelings about commitment and marriage and children. Like he is asked to put those in really specific terms. And that's not something that we usually are asking men to do in the world, or expect men to do in the real world.
I believe they do have a mental health professional there that they can see.
But is that more for like crisis time? Or?
Well, my understanding is they can use them at their discretion. So they can request a meeting with them. Obviously, in that situation, you know, when we think about counseling and mental health help, there's not a lot that person's going to be able to do as far as these deep-seated, you know, issues that Matt has. Danielle and I talked about this, and I agree with her that, you know, we're getting pushed into this, especially on Twitter and with the personalities that are involved, this like dichotomy that it can either be, you know, reductive or it can be helpful. And I think it's both. If this is what Matt needs, good on him to have this conversation. And he is articulate and he is thoughtful. He is all the things that you would want in a partner if they have family issues and they need to work through them. I mean, some of the stuff that he says and the way he thinks about it, it's like, man, I'd marry the guy. You know, I mean, he is the type of person that is thoughtful about who he is and where he comes from and how to improve those things, which we all need to be. And family patterns get passed down. With that being said, I'm a firm believer that the worst way to deal with mental health issues or family issues is to not talk about them. And so my concern is that some of the voices are saying, don't air your dirty laundry because it may make people who have stereotyped beliefs further entrench them. And I understand that is, I don't understand because I haven't had to deal with those stereotypes, but also I get very concerned that when voices say that, it pushes people away from those types of conversations. And that's, you know, that's how families don't get help, because they're worried that someone's going to judge them, or that's why people don't get help, because they're worried that someone's going to judge them. And so I think it's important. But as far as Matt goes, you know, one of the questions Danielle has on here is, do we know him? And it's like, I feel like, you know, he's really putting himself out there, which can't be easy. I think every family has dirty laundry, and it would be hard to go on TV and talk about it. Not my way of doing it. I would rather have a private conversation in my family if I had problems, but I'm not Matt James. I am who I am. Yeah.
I think part of his I think we do know him. And my concern for him is that one of the ways I feel like I'm recognizing what's happening with him, which happens on The Bachelor all the time, I feel like, is he's genuine. He wants marriage. He wants a commitment. He says, I'm ready for this healthy relationship that, you know, I never saw modeled for me, or I want to recreate the relationship my parents had, or something like that. But then so often what it comes down to at the end is this one woman who so often represents a strong, committed, healthy relationship with somebody that you're fundamentally like friends with. And then the person over here who represents this kind of drama and manipulation. I'm not a huge fan of Rachael, right? The sort of drama and manipulation that is maybe not the healthiest relationship. And so while intellectually he says, I want the commitment and the marriage, but then he chooses the one that's not going to really give him that. And I'm worried about him. I'm worried about his anxieties and what that might lead him to in his choices.
Absolutely. Yeah. Part of the reason I wrote down this question, do we know Matt James, is I was listening to the podcast Two Black Girls in a Rose. And, this was a week or two ago. And they were talking about how they're like, we just don't feel like we know him. And, their argument was that it had to do with kind of how the show had put so much on the dramas and things like that like we really hadn't had an opportunity to get to know him that much or hear his story. And so what becomes interesting is here was a moment where you kind of got to know him some. That being said, like I do think that we get glimpses of his personality, but I kind of do feel like a year ago on TikTok, watching like his quarantine crew on TikTok, I might have gotten more of a sense of his personality than I have like even throughout the show, because there's all this focus on the 30 other women there and their relationships. And so, I did appreciate that we got, because he had said things like, oh, well, people don't know me, I'm kind of guarded, I have these issues. And you're like, what issues? Like, tell me what those issues are. And I think we kind of, we did sort of get that.
Didn't he start this season saying, I have never been in love before?
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, I was worried about that. So maybe the question is, does Matt know himself?
Right.
But I think it also sort of hurt our perception of the women as well, because they spent so much time on the drama among the women that by the time we got to the end, the last few contestants, I was still like, okay, which one is this? Who is that one? Is it the one, there's the one with the crown. I know her, but like, what's going on with these other ones? Because, if they weren't making a lot of noise in the house, we didn't spend a lot of time on them.
Absolutely. So let's spend some time on them. First date, Michelle. They go to this Dutch spa. Dutch spa, you all in?
No.
No, hell no.
No, ew.
Oh, you all are both no. I'm like, bring it on, rub me in some butter.
I would have tasted everything though. Like that doesn't bother me. And she was like, taste it. I would have been like, all right. Like that stuff doesn't bother me.
The foot oatmeal.
Yeah, I just don't like, I don't get how that is relaxing in any way.
Bill's
like sexy time. They've had a challenge having dates that are meant to be sexy be actually sexy. I mean, not to jump ahead or anything, but like there's not a lot of that in this episode. And maybe it could be fun, like with my husband, to like put our feet in oatmeal and like get in milk baths or whatever. But if I'm on like the first overnight with The Bachelor, I don't know that that's what I would choose.
I'm like all in, you all. I'm like, nothing makes me sexier than oatmeal.
I think the funny thing is, like, at that point in most relationships, you don't really need much encouragement for like sexy time. It's like, this is something that you need, like Adrianne said, like 7 years into marriage.
I love that. Okay, so I really appreciated, like, later on in their date, Michelle was, talking about, she offered the question, how do we stay in love? And I thought that was mature and thoughtful and wise. So what did you all think about their dinner date, their conversation?
They are so far ahead of everybody else, like relationship wise. Like she is so much more mature and what she understands a relationship to be. In some ways, I worry that maybe Matt is not that mature and that might become an issue. But that's not untypical for two people, you know, when one person's further ahead in how they understand a relationship. And the good news is Matt seems to be willing to take a look at himself and think about it. But like, those are the type of conversations that people should be having when they like are thinking about getting married. You know, how do we keep this going when it is 5 o'clock on a Wednesday and we have two kids and they are just raising hell? How are we going to still want to be married, and what are those things? And yeah, I feel like he should have just ended it there. Like, I feel like at this point I'm starting to wonder if she's out of his league in some ways.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that yeah, he should choose her. I just don't think there's any question. And one of the reasons is like she does tell the story about how her parents have been married for 30 years, and if that's what he wants, you know, then she's sort of saying, I have a model for this. And you know, I think that she asked that question, and she's sort of imagining this sort of place down the road. And I think, you know, she's coming from a maybe a naive place, right? As like sort of romanticizing the marriage still, or the idea of it. But I think it's possible that the answer to her question, which is relevant to the show, is you start by picking the right person. And that so many sort of relationship failures start by just simply choosing the wrong person to begin with, or not seeing the red flags that are there. And she's wondering, you know, how do, you know, if you put cute notes in someone's lunch for work that day, like that's going to keep your marriage going.
Yes. So sorry, my brain's like in all sorts of places. One of the things that this prompted me to start to research is there were multiple times that both her and Bri kind of, and maybe even Rachael, you've heard this sort of like love myth of love conquers all, right? Like, oh,
yeah, it doesn't.
I wouldn't want to do this date, but I can do it with you, so I can make it through, right? This love conquers all. And so I was like, like, what does this myth do? And you know, things like that. And I went down this like rabbit hole of research. And it was really fascinating because I read this research article. I don't know the title of it off the top of my head, but it was talking about how some of these love myths are like actually can be kind of helpful because like it creates this like positive notion of like what a relationship can do, and actually can offer people tools in terms of like working through. So, and I've just always thought love myth bad, right? But like it was like distinguishing between like how people use the different love myths, and that there are actually like positive ways of using them in your relationship. And I was like, it was really interesting to me because I just like assumed always bad, but I don't know.
I feel like it's probably like the spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Like, they are useful. They will not save your marriage. Like, you know, they are useful if they help you persevere and get to a place where you work on the issues in your marriage. However, they are not going to be the thing that helps you. You know, they're not going to be the thing that saves you. So
I think that makes sense to me. So we have this awkward post-date walk of shame. I don't know which
victory voyage. I said this in our notes. I said this with my friends. I am sex positive. You should go out, like, go for it. The women should be high-fiving. They should be exchanging, you know, tips. there's a part of me that this is what drives me nuts about the show. It's built around sex, right? But then there's this weird, like, but we're not gonna talk about it, right? And it's like, yeah, they had sex. Like, they should feel whatever they feel.
Did you think that he and Michelle had sex? I didn't.
Maybe they didn't. I guess I don't know. I just feel like sometimes we like build stuff around the specter of sex, but then if we actually get to that point, people are like, whoa, like, this is America. We don't talk about that type of stuff. And it's like, so we'll do everything up to that point, and then we'll get like uncomfortable about it.
I love the idea of women exchanging tips. Like, oh,
I-
Matt really likes it when you do
Yeah.
this. Give it a shot. You know,
But if it were guys, that's the thing. I feel like if it were guys, we would be like, oh, boys will be boy. Like, why can't women go to high five?
I don't know. Have you seen The Bachelorette? They do not do that.
You know what? I think some of it's edited out. Like, especially Tyler. Tyler seemed,
They're
and I
coming
approve,
back
like,
and high-fiving.
he was like, and then when he was actually tweeting on that season, when he found out that her and Peter, right, Pilot Pete, had sex in the windmill, and he's like, Peter, you dog. And it was like, good for him. Like, I don't know. I mean, you're on the show, you know how it's going to happen.
Ooh, I think that'd still be just a tough. I think that'd be so tough. I think I would struggle with this.
I agree with the awkwardness, like that they are set up for a totally awkward, but I like awkward stuff, so I kind of giggle about it while it happens.
I thought what was awkward during that, or right before, I guess, the walk of shame was the thank you for sharing that again with me. When she said, I love you. And I just like cringed at that. I was like, that's the best he can do? That's it? It's just the worst. Like, if you, like, in a normal circumstance, if you say I love you to someone and say thank you for sharing that with me again, you're just like, oh, this is not happening.
My initial thought after that was, gosh, I hope he does a better job when the cameras are off at expressing how he feels for her.
Yeah. I mean, there have been seasons where somebody said, I love you back. And they actually didn't end up always picking that person anyway. So it was The Bachelorette, I believe, and she told one of the guys, I love you too, and then she didn't pick him at the end, and he had been very confident that he was going to get picked.
Yeah. Tough stuff, this, dating multiple people at once stuff. So we move on to a date with Bri, and they have this like day camping trip, and it really seemed like the wrong date for the two of them, which for me is I actually really like Bri, and there's ways that I think that they have some things in common that it makes sense, but it also seems like he's maybe a lot more adventurous and that she'll go along. But I was like, if they weren't on the show, like, would she go along with these sorts of things? Also, they made lots of pitching a tent jokes.
Love it.
And I was
that's what she said moments.
Oh yeah, I was like giggling like a little 12-year-old boy in my living room. So they connect over family issues. Bill, you got an extra credit for it.
I do, but I'm gonna start out by saying this. I backpack. So I have like 5 days out in Washington. I'm gonna do the Grand Tetons this summer. Elaine, one of the things I appreciate about her, she has no interest. And our friend Christy, who is on the show, and Jorge, they go backpacking and they love it. And like they're always trying to get Elaine to go, and she's like, nah. And I feel like camping is good if both people are on board. It is a horrible idea if there's one on board and one not. Just for anyone looking for dating advice, ask before you take your partner, because if they're going to hate it, they're going to hate it. As far as family patterns, attraction. So Kim, friend of the show, Kim, co-host Kim, had asked when we were watching this, what is it, research around like attraction and family patterns? Because obviously Bri and Matt keep kind of like talking about, we have this similar experience. And so, with having dads that are not, that may have not been involved or may have been in and out of their lives. And then what does that mean for relationships later on? And what we find is that people are attracted and they build attraction around similarities, right? So it is not unheard of for people to be like, we have similar families. This builds this kind of attraction and trust between us. What we find though is that your relationship patterns and attachment are built from your family patterns. And so if you do not have a strong parent figure in one parent, and I say that because if we're thinking about same-sex couples, you could have, we keep talking about father figure. It is totally possible that we could have some people on The Bachelor on a season where they have two moms or two dads. And so I think we should get away from this. You need a strong male and you need a strong female figure in your life. You need strong parenting figures, and they need to demonstrate how a happy relationship goes where you support each other. And so if you do not have that, then you start to think, how are we going to learn those skills that we need to be a good partner? And that is probably where that relationship is going to have some bumps in the road. Now, what we find from research is that if both people are willing to work and learn, that can be overcome. And so that's one of the reasons why, I said at the beginning, good for Matt. He clearly understands that he might have a deficiency there and he is willing to work on it. Now he just needs a partner that's willing to communicate and say, here's what I need, and be willing to kind of work through him with that. So that's my extra credit.
Woohoo! Thanks, Bill. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so they have their overnight. She says,
don't take your partner, but the takeaway, do not take your partner camping unless they really want to go. And partner, if you don't want to go camping, say, nah, I won't do this.
And also, honestly, these are supposed to be fantasy dates.
And she did it. So with the overnight, she did say, is this where we're sleeping?
Yeah.
Are we really sleeping here? And you could tell she was just like, fuck all. Like, this is not, I did not sign up.
A tent and some s'mores. There's your fantasy suite. And I mean, she did all right, but it was me.
I once food poisoned my friends and I because I didn't cook our burgers all the way through. And Elaine was the only one who escaped this because she doesn't eat meat. And she was just like not into this camping trip at all either. And so, yeah. She has moral high ground now. Sorry, I keep interrupting you, Danielle. Go.
Oh, that was good. I was just thinking about Tasha and that camper that they had for the fantasy suite too.
The Airstream.
People are gonna be so happy when like COVID allows them to like go on amazing dates again. All right, so there's the overnight with Bri. She says, "I love you." He tears up. I thought that was interesting. Now I'm reading the tears a little bit differently. Then we have the date with Rachael. All right, so let's talk a little bit about her insecurities. Justified, not justified. She's mopey.
No.
What's going on? Get over it, Rachael. We all say nobody has any sympathy for her.
Well, you know what the show is. Like, this is a systematic thing, and I think they play it up. Like, we know that you like them. We know that you're going to be like, I would be uncomfortable as well. However, like, you don't mope around. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that what she's expressing is like, or even maybe she, on some level, she feels like what she's expressing is her sort of issues with this situation. But I think what she's actually doing is trying to get a certain response from him. Mm-hmm. I think she's being manipulative. I think she wants his attention. And I think she, she got a really good response from him when she, crash landed after skydiving. And she, I think she read that right. He's looking to help someone and rescue someone. That is
I couldn't put it into words, but that is what, like, I kind of think is that she wanted a response, and he is somebody who likes to be the hero. Our friend Christy keeps saying that, and it was like clockwork. He jumped in and you could tell, and then she was fine. Mm-hmm. So if you think about interaction patterns and things like that, like, she wants something, she elicits it, he reinforces it, and then he gets what he wants, which is she's happy. Yeah. And it's like, if you're thinking about toxic or bad interaction patterns for a relationship, like, right, you can see how this is gonna go, like you can watch this balloon down the road, right?
I also see him saying, she's so upset, she must really like me.
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I think that's also like leading into this toxic pattern.
And for somebody who might have issues with attachment around his dad, you know, you can see how somebody who you're like, oh, they really like me, how you could jump onto that real quick and like cling, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about Rachel much more. I agree with everything that you all said, but I just want to say, so like they have a dinner and they spend the night with each other, and then we have the rose ceremony.
Oh no, but wait, first, how come she gets fireworks? Like she got fireworks, Rachel did, and everyone else is like camping and, you know,
Weird spot date.
Fireworks. Another
We got
thing.
fireworks.
What are they trying to
got sticks of butter.
Another thing that I could take or leave. I don't get fireworks.
No, they always do fireworks, but I just thought it was like messed up that like Rachel gets fireworks.
They scare my dogs. They're loud. My neighbors hit our house with one last year.
Yeah. Bri gets a tent and some s'mores.
Bri pitches a tent.
I think Matt is the one who did that.
Oh, then they I will just say they had like a really weird and gross finger comment too during the clay
pottery
scene. It was like, I'll just something about putting a finger in the middle, and I was like, oh, come on, y'all could have edited that out. Like
too with that. It was a lot.
Come on.
I did tell Danielle like that would have been, if I was there, that would have been a penis. Like I would have immediately, like I just couldn't help myself. The 12-year-old boy in me would have been like, yeah.
I feel like I promised they tried to film like a sort of ghost style moment.
Yes, yeah.
That didn't make it to air.
But no on-chain melody played.
Did not go well. So, you know, they have the rose ceremony. Bri goes home. I wasn't that surprised, I guess.
I knew it. America knew it. We all knew it.
So then they have like a conversation afterwards. I thought that it was what you would expect in some ways. These breakups are kind of weird. I mean, I know, Bill, you've talked about that some on these on the podcast, but you know, it is kind of weird because it's almost like, okay, well, you just broke up. So then you have this conversation that's like the breakup conversation that normally happens before you break up.
Right.
What happens like after.
Yeah.
But yeah, so episode in a sentence.
I hope he chooses right. I fear he will not.
Yeah, your family's important, and that was a bad sentence. Your family teaches you what to do, but it doesn't dictate it.
I'll go with Adrianne, and oh gosh, my dog is barking right now. I'll go with Adrianne, and my sentence is going to be just pick Michelle. Like, just pick Michelle.
Is Vaughn in the room?
No, I gotta go open my door.
Get brunch. Show us Vaughn.
Okay.
Go ahead, Adrianne. You were going to say something.
I don't know. I've lost it now.
My husband went and got the dog. He for me. But so we got some good episodes in a sentence. Adrianne, who do you want to give some shout outs to?
Well, I think I'll give shout outs to like the other things that I'm doing the past like week or so. So I'm listening to the book Uneducated on audio on my commute lately, and that's been really interesting about like a woman who grows up in a fundamentalist Mormon family that are like disaster preppers, and she doesn't go to school.
Tara Westover?
Tara Westover, yeah.
Oh, that's a really good book.
It's fascinating. Yeah. Good listening in the car. And then the other shows that I'm watching, Married at First Sight is really good if you like The Bachelor, and you can kind of break down the relationship dynamics and, you know, answer Michelle's question of what does it take to make it work. And then here's a really odd one is Love After Lockup I've been watching, and it's a little bit more of a train wreck, but I don't know. I'm fascinated.
I'm in. I like those recommendations. I can't wait to read your books.
Yes. Your copy of Bridgerton is gonna go on red because you're getting Adrianne's book.
Right, absolutely.
I'm probably gonna wait till it becomes a movie, Adrianne, but I'm gonna have Danielle tell me about it.
I love it. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, everyone have a good weekend.
This was really fun.
Anything else?
That's good.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody. You've been listening to Batchademia with your hosts, Doctors Danielle Dick McGew and Bill Henniger. All opinions expressed on this show are solely the opinion of the person who spoke them. If you like our podcast, please consider following us, leaving us a 5-star rating, and a positive review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, please share with your friends, family, and other ardent Bachelor content lovers. If you have comments or questions you would like us to address on the show, you can email us at batchademia@gmail.com or on the Twitter with the handle @batchademia. Thanks for listening.